Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the South Coast Artists Index. And we have how blessed am I that I know two world-class illusionists. And the only reason why this gentleman is on second is because I couldn't get him on when I first asked him, and Lynn Dilly's beat him to the punch. So I'll let him introduce himself and spell his name, and just for the record, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, I am Jon Stetson, and you want me to spell my name? Is JonStetson. If you'd like to add a .com, you can go to the website. But
well, that's important too, because I'm sure people are always trying to interject an H in John. So that kind of
I had it surgically removed in 1976. One of my great teachers, and I've had so many great teachers, thought it would be a little more aerodynamic to take that H out because it looked better in print.
Okay, now I hope I'm not going to embarrass myself. If you are the same person I think you are, we worked. Well, I was the set designer, but we met working for the opera at what was SMU back then.
Yes.
Okay.
I remember the circumstances because you kind of morphed two people into one, and that person was me.
Okay.
There was a fellow who I did shows with.
Uh-huh.
We took on some, when I did the White House when I was quite young, he was with me. And he is originally a New Bedford guy, Dartmouth guy. Now he's in Hollywood, where he is a key grip and you name it. And he's worked on so many films and so many things. His name is Michael Festoso. And
okay.
Michael and I worked together and spent a lot of time together, and we always had decks of cards and stuff like that. And so when I was at the opera, I wasn't actually working.
Well, no, because I remember you most of the time sitting in your ass on the floor, because there's always going to be those breaks, whether rehearsals or actually when we were doing actual performances, and you'd be doing these card tricks, and it was kind of like, oh shit, I lost my cue. It's like, that kind of thing,
Yeah, but Michael was and is very active. He's a great guy with so many wonderful interests, and has done very well for himself. His mom still lives in Dartmouth, and of course with my work I was traveling constantly. And I was on the road for some years, almost 300 days. And so in my travels and journeys, I got to see so many of my great teachers and friends. And that was one of the nice things. Traveling was never a problem for me. I always enjoyed it. Basically, I knew people virtually everywhere. So I could, it was home everywhere. And it was because of this network of people who was comics and magicians and mentalists, which is my forte, and what I've always wanted to do, and all of these different people in show business and what have you. It's just been a very rich life in that, a very wonderful tapestry of just people from around the world who are, and it's the kind of folks who you have a conversation with 5 years ago, you see them and you pick up in the exact same spot.
Yes.
And a lot of that has to do with the shared passion.
Yeah.
I believe.
When you were on that opera, were you there for the Kadali for Boris Goldovsky, the voice of the Metropolitan, which is an arguable thing because there were two voices. One of them was the voice. I keep forgetting his name. I never met him, and I never worked for him. But Boris had his own little segment where he was turning the opera world upside down by stopping a performance in its tracks and saying, "No, wait. He's probably wondering why Spadafucili is doing what he's doing." So were you working? I think it was called the Kadali at the time.
Yeah. I was hanging around then. Yeah.
So for Joseph Colbert and Madame Jacqueline Colbert, Bazine Colbert, because show business, right?
That's good.
And it was such a huge network. And it's funny you say about 300 days a year. I still remember the exact spot where I was standing. I was working for Al Petrocelli. His actual name was Aloysius. Al Petrocelli from Scrambled Legs Productions. And we were in a scenery shop, and my ex-wife thought she might be pregnant. And, there's no cell phones back there. So the thing was, she was going to call the payphone in the scenery shop. And the thing was, she was going to say, whether she killed a frog or not. Well, she tells me she killed a frog. So I'm kind of stunned because it's our first child. And it was our only child. And 5 minutes later, Al Petrocelli comes up to me and said, "Hey, Sarah Caldwell from Boston Opera hooked you up with Boston Ballet, and they want you to be their set designer. And not only that, they want you to redo the Nutcracker." And I'm standing there going, what? And he said, "Yeah, but you got to be on the road 50 weeks out of the year." I'm like, I'm going to have her pregnant. And I made the decision not to do it. Yeah. And I explained to my daughter, why. And there were some complications. And every year when the Boston Ballet Nutcracker thing comes up and she's in the room with, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Dad." It's like, you know what? I would never trade it for anything else, but.
Yeah, well, I had the sad choice of children or luggage, and we just my wife and I have been together for many, many years, and we were just never blessed with children. It just didn't work out that way. Yeah. And Gail traveled with me early on a bit, and then she got into education, and she was a paraprofessional special needs teacher in Mattapoisett for many years, and it was a great it's a great team. Great, great to have somebody who just recently. I have a thing that some folks might be interested in called the Stetson Circle. It's on Facebook, and it encompasses a lot of my thoughts and philosophies and motivation and inspiration. All the Asians are there, and some great imagery and things. It's on Facebook. It's the Stetson Circle. It's a nice place for nice people.
I'm a member.
Right, and we've had some remarkable things. I get daily emails on this, and there are some that I really can't. I don't want to repeat here, but there were some drastic things that had happened as a result of that and the good work. So I'm thrilled. Yeah, I'm thrilled with it.
But, let's go back to those days of in the wings at the theater at what was then SMU, Southeastern Massachusetts University. From that point, how did it evolve for you?
Oh, well, I think we were speaking before about that the key word of passion, and you have to love something, and obsession. Well, I don't know. There's a fine line there. I had been blessed, as I may have mentioned, with so many great teachers and people who took great interest in what I wanted to do. My main focus was always the mind-oriented things. And I remember spending so much time with my grandfather. Well, actually, both of my grandfathers when I was young. And they both had the interest in people and the ability to read people. And they taught me things when I was quite young. As a matter of fact, my mom's dad, who was I think that's where I get my eccentricity from. He would take me downtown Boston a lot, in the neighborhood of the Parker House, where it was so much fun for me because up until pandemic, we had a show there that was running for 2 years called Mind Reading Confidential. And it really talked about people you meet on the street. And we all think we're closed books, but we're also open. And you never know who you may be standing next to at any given time. And the whole premise of the show was that kind of thing, and it was very Parker House centric and the neighborhood. And because there's still a few great little shops that have lasted for 60 years that are still in some of the cubby holes there, and whatnot. So that was a very fun show for me to do, and we look forward to getting back. But going back to the original points, leaving backstage, well, if I wasn't in an audience somewhere, I was backstage somewhere, or I was working on these different ideas for things. I was told by my elders that somebody who wanted to do mind-oriented things and people-oriented things, thought-oriented stuff, had to be older. And I agree completely. It has to do with life experience. And when you're dealing with, let's say I'm having you think of your first celebrity crush, let's say, and you have this person in mind, you have much more emotional attachment than you do to the six of clubs. if you pull it out, okay, here's a card and we're going to do something or whatever. Now, I'm not saying there aren't great things that demonstrate telepathy and clairvoyance with playing cards, both quote unquote tricks and things that are real. I've kind of crossed that line a little bit and I've seen real magic. I have absolutely positively seen real magic in my life. And what amazes me is how many people who claim to be magicians or what have you, who don't believe in magic, who just don't believe in the concept of real magic and that things are real. Now, there's of course a couple different ways of looking at everything. I was fortunate enough to work on the CBS television series, The Mentalist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I got a call sort of out of the blue on that, and was asked, pressed into action, and people say, hey, that whole show was saying that nothing is psychic. And it's like, yeah, because I can create that scenario because I understand it, because I believe we're all looking at the same stuff from a different perspective. I look at, if you do not believe in a natural sixth sense, when all of your five senses are percolating in the moment, right here, right now, you create your sixth sense. That is your sixth sense, because you're more in tune to pick things up, to see things, to pay attention, to notice what's happening around you, to feel what's going on inside you, and to feel what's going on inside of others. We all have this, and this is a natural gift. This is what we as a species were given. Once again, I feel that we have a tendency to go against nature quite often. Anything that I will bring into, say, our Stetson circle or my thoughts and philosophies, they must go along with the rules of nature, because nature is going to win. Nature is the ultimate champion with the big tag team belt on WWF, that nature wins. And what we're doing in so many cases is we're staring nature in the face, turning our back and running in the opposite direction as fast as we can. And I fear that we're teaching our children to go against laws of nature. In nature, there are winners and there are losers. It's a simple fact. Hurricane goes through, a tornado goes through, my trailer is destroyed, yours is right next to mine, and you're untouched. How do you explain it? You can't. but you do know that nature is the ultimate champion, and in nature there are winners, there are losers, there's survival of the fittest. And this just in nature, everybody doesn't get a trophy.
That's true.
And so, without going so far in that direction, I think that I do not, whatever anybody believes is just fine with me. I love it. If people ever say any of my stuff, is it real? Is it not real? I'll tell you the truth. All I want them to know is that it's difficult, that it's not easy to do.
Yeah, because there's always that possibility, especially on a stage with all eyes on you, that you might just be wrong.
Oh yeah, and that is one of the exciting things about the concept of mentalism. Now, when someone asks what a mentalist is, there's so many different definitions that kick about these days. Basically, I cut it down to to being as simple as someone who demonstrates feats of ESP.
Yes.
And that's what it is. I'm fortunate that I've had all the adventures that I've had, the people with whom I've had the honor to work, to write for, to create for, through the years. There's nothing that I've not learned from. In not too long after the time at the opera, I would be in Boston, and we were working Faneuil Hall, the streets, just when it first started, and people were great. There was some great talent out there back then. It was wonderful. Doing any kind of show that would come up and down the pike, beginning to do campus dates, and that was really sort of the birth of the comedy scene, boom, whatever it is we want to call it. And so and that harkens back to the 50s when there were nightclubs and an act could work every night. The problem today, the big problem today is flight time. There's nowhere to get it. And I'm sorry, it's just not the same on YouTube. We're talking about two completely different things. And before we finish up, I'd love to talk about the Zoom and the things that are going on now, but that's interesting. But once again, going back to those days, so I'd be in comedy clubs, in the comedy condos, they used to call them. So everybody who got famous out of that bunch, everybody who had a TV show, all the people, I'd worked with them. And one of the reasons is because I had a lot of material, because I was I was morphing into the mentalism and little hypnosis things, and as well as the comedy and the things and the stuff. And I created this character. So I had a lot of time, as they put it. So I plugged into lots of places. Because remember, back then, not just were there the clubs, but every, Sluggo's Tavern on Tuesday nights, it's, Mike and Stool night. And those were some essentially rough times.
Yeah.
I met a wonderful fellow named Steve Hill. And Steve owned the Seacrest Hotel in Falmouth. And he is somebody who's remarkable. He died at the age of 50. To say Steve was flamboyant was an understatement. He looked like Pavarotti. He could sing like Pavarotti. He was the funniest man ever, and he knew everybody in show business. So while I was doing all the somewhat, modern type of things, meaning the comedy clubs of the day and the street performing and all of that, Steve got me working in the Catskill Mountains and on the cruise ships. And so learning a lot more about old show business. I'll tell you what was another wonderful thing. And you mentioned Lynn before, because I know she had this experience. We used to do shows at White's in Westport.
Yep.
And there would be a 3-act show with one of, the great old school comics, a singer, and then a variety actor.
Dinner and a show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they would bus the senior citizens in and all of that kind of stuff. And it was great. It was great fun. And I remember when they said, you know, do you want to come in as the comic? You make some more money. I go, absolutely not. I'm coming here to hang out with these guys. I want to hang out with me. I want to hang out with them. So I've always had I've had the sort of the Karate Kid experience where I've had teachers, and not just when I was young. When I was older, having teachers sort of close the door in my face, and this type of thing. If I wanted one little nuance, one little idea, one little something, a technique that they had, and I always believed that they should be compensated and paid for it. So it's an interesting transformation now, because so many of my, as that great line in the movie, 8 Men Out at the end, those fellows are all gone now. And next thing you know, it's me.
You're one of those fellas. The
30 years ago, I started to get some recognition nationally, internationally, with people who are not just, working for the public, but internally and things. A bit of a reputation as someone who was a beast from the East who went after everything and did so much. And it was around that time when so much of the work became corporate work, which I still do to this day, among other things.
In fact, when we were having a discussion about that gig I was trying to get you, that was like huge at that point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the great thing about that was there was so many challenges. Or they would come to, you'd work for a production house and they say, can you do this? Yes, I can. And we would find interesting ways to have their sales meetings, their awards banquets, taking the predictability out of it. The just plain entertaining places. With the madness of it all happening places. For example, there was one night on a Tuesday, I'm in and this was like the current, so many of the weeks were just plain like. I was at the Royal Palace in Monte Carlo, and that was actually for Ferrari. And it was a beautiful setup, a beautiful show, a beautiful everything. And then that Thursday night, I was in a meat packing plant in Omaha, doing the show for the dudes in the white coats. And for the same money.
Yep. Yeah.
But the point is, can you? We're having a ski retreat. We're having a conference of 10,000 people. We're doing this. We're doing that. And at the same time, there was a great aunt I had who was a very underground intuitive reader, and she taught me the cards and of methods of reading and tea leaves and palmistry and all this type of stuff. She was making remarkable money during the Depression. This woman, she went to Hollywood to try to be in the movies. It didn't work, but boy, did they all like to see what her cards were going to say to them. So she worked for the rich and famous, in which was kind of other offshoot of the corporate jobs, the celebrity jobs and celebrity places that you put into. People keep saying you've got to write a book on it, because it was just so, every day was different.
Yeah, you do have to write a book on it, and I'm gonna ratchet back to Cheap John's.
Oh.
How influential was Cheap John's on you? And the other thing too was, okay, other than the itching powder and the other kind of the gum that made your teeth black, and how many practicing magicians? I mean, as I've been very fortunate to do these podcasts, I've done like 70 of them, and I've learned something for everyone I've done. And there's now categories that started to pop up my head. We have the graphic artists, which we used to call them cartoonists, but they're graphic artists.
Yeah.
And then we have the graffiti muralists, which is another huge block. Then we have designers and illustrators that have been quite successful, and of course there's the painters and the performing arts and literary arts as well. But going back to looking at that, I mean, I know of you and Lynn, but were there others that came from this area that did a little bit more than bar mitzvahs and
Yeah, there were. There was a very interesting fellow who was born in New Bedford named Al Delage. And Al was sort of had a thing of being one of the fastest magicians in the world, kind of a reputation. And there was and he worked successfully everywhere. But one of the interesting things about Al Delage that very few people know is that he went to dinner one night at the Kotkins house in New Jersey with another lawyer, amateur magician named Ed Michel. And they spoke to Mr. and Mrs. Kotkin about their son who had the passion and was not going to, you couldn't stop him. You couldn't stop me.
Yeah.
Only he did a little bit better at it because you know this guy is David Copperfield.
Oh, geez.
So Al Delage from New Bedford is really the one who sealed the deal to allow David's family to see that Al was a gentleman and that he could make a living, and that things weren't all bad.
Now, hold on a second. I'm just going to put you on a quick pause. Daisy's going to get me in trouble.
Yeah, it's and Daisy's got that line from the most terrifying line a man has ever heard in a movie, and that was Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction.
Oh, yeah.
I will not be ignored.
Yeah, so folks, in case I put it on pause, Daisy, our American foxhound, decided she was going to make herself comfortable in a way that wasn't mother approved. But
that's right.
So that's a great story about David Copperfield.
Yeah. Well, as people will tell you, I'm a walking repository of useless information. Through my walk through all of this, I have been equally interested in the history of variety arts, and I've written essays on this, but I've attended and I've delivered speeches at history conferences. I'm a history buff in general, but when it comes to all of this stuff and just the ways that people worked and what they had to do and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, this is a big part of my makeup. And I believe it's also a big part of why I had some success.
Yeah. Now, Cheap Jaws, like I said, I mean, you can't set up a shop if you've only got like one or two magicians in the neighborhood. I mean,
here's
and he had some high end, the cabinets and all the other stuff in there. Here's
the problem. There are always a lot of those stores made their money selling fake puke and I remember they had the risque gags on one side and things like this. And for many of these stores, Halloween supported them for the entire year because every place was not in the Halloween business. You had to go to a joke shop of some type. It wasn't like Spencer Gifts didn't have it all. CVS didn't. They had none of them. They have nothing. Yeah. You'd have to go to these places. And as we refer to the brick and mortar magic shops, I wrote this years ago, calling them an endangered species. I have a pal who has the largest one in the world right now, Tim Felix at Midwest Magic, just outside of Chicago, Franklin Park, Illinois. These stores are falling like flies, basically because of internet things. And don't let me get out of this without discussing the word secrets.
Okay.
um,
Alright.
Internet things are there, and you see people will see say a book or a prop advertised on the internet. They'll go into the brick and mortar shop now and say, "Oh, can I see that done?" "Oh, okay, great." And then right there before they leave the store, they actually order it on their phone because it's $3 cheaper.
God, yeah.
The thing about I would go. My parents were crazy because I was on buses to New York City every weekend, going to a magic shop called Tannen's, and we would rub shoulders with so many of the greats, but we would and then they closed early, and we went to a deli, and I remember taking the bus back and practicing all the way back and this kind of thing. But the thing is, at those magic shops were guys who would kick a young guy's ass. You getting a little too big? You getting a little too big for yourself? Maybe the way you're holding these cards, you think it's your God's gift, and it's like, no. And so that's what's missing. These young people don't get that. That and secrets are too readily available.
Yes.
Everywhere, and it ties itself into a whole mess when I talk about secrets, because it doesn't matter to me how something is done. What matters to me is how the person feels in the process.
Mm-hmm.
As well as doing my my signature show, I do something called the Ladies Only Psychic Party, and we do it online as well as doing it live. And it's a show that began with quite a guy who was a little bit of a scoundrel, but he was an incredible performer named Alexander, around 1905, because he would fill the theaters so much that he would have to have a ladies only show, because he was a crystal gazer and there was no place for women to go. And I mean, as well as doing some conventional illusionary type stuff.
Right.
He had this big show. He had the turban. He was 6'6", and the robes, and he spoke in an Irish brogue. Very complicated.
Yeah, you don't expect that.
But he began this thing, and it came into my stead, my world, about 15 years ago. And once again, I've had people who have said such incredible things have happened to them as a result of being there, as far as a transformational experience. It's more of a motivational, fun, but self-discovery type of place. I mix them up almost every time I do them, but it's live, love, laugh, learn, and understand. So it lets people become a little more self-aware, and that transcends into a lot of my other work as well.
With modern times, it's every day. I mean, modern times are modern times. It's like, it's people, like the word contemporary. It's now. It was yesterday was now, or the day before yesterday was now. It's still now.
Yeah.
So the thing that we get more technology, and technology has always been around. I worked for Tony Souza for the Office of Historic Preservation. I really got a good feel for the city of New Bedford. We surveyed every edifice prior to 1920 in the city. It was a gargantuan task with I think there's about a dozen people in that office. The thing is that when the first trolleys came out and the overhead wires, that was a curse from God for a lot of people, because they were afraid those wires were going to come down and scare the horses or electrocute somebody or whatever. So we've always had that. And then the more technology we get, the further away from nature we get.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and this is only my 2 cents, that people really do want to believe. It's not whether they believe or not. It's whether they want to believe or not. And I think the biggest danger is when they stop wanting to believe.
I couldn't put it any better. you know, when you mention technology in general, a lot of new technology was presented in magic shows. Or, you know, we're talking back here,
Mhm.
17, 1800s, even up until today,
Mhm.
even up until today. Now, because there's so much technology today, I am reverting back as best I can to to make, even though I'm doing my things on so much of this is going on in cyberspace with my new show is virtual mind amazements.
Mhm.
In doing that, I want to go back to more pencil and paper and to have the show look as analog as possible, because it's very easy for someone to say, "Oh, you somehow just did a thing." Okay, that's how it was done. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Um,
It's all
but there,
Photoshop.
but there were some great magicians. But there were some great magicians. A magician named Di Vernon, who many people just revered and worshipped. And he said, well, basically, if they can come up with a solution, they figured it out. Doesn't matter if it's wrong or not. The other thing that he had done and said that the greater part of the last century, the greatest travesty in quote unquote magic is the trivialization of magic due to contrived presentations. I'm not going to say I was never there. Sometimes when I was in the clubs and things and learned and evolved from all this stuff, but it's absolutely true. The presentation will insult someone's intelligence. Steve Martin once said, anybody who has no talent desperately wants to get into show business usually becomes a magician. And Steve loves magic more than anybody. Than anybody I know, and he watches things and he'll say, hey, watch this. He'll want to show me. Now, I don't do quote unquote like coin magic, but boy, he does. And he's really, really good at it. Woody Allen is a very good magician, especially when it comes to the handling of coins. And there's so many people who had magic as a prominent part in their life and have gone on to, you know, develop into other things, but still maintaining these interests. Now, getting back to the technology aspect of things, magnets were magic. If you didn't know if you don't know what a magnet is, holy crow. Now there's was a magician named Robert Houdin, who was a clock maker, but he was basically dubbed as the father of modern magic due to the fact he would perform in contemporary clothing, which at that time would have been a tailcoat. Whereas people prior to that were doing a lot of robes and things of this type. He was very, very successful, and his material was taken by many others and adopted into different things. But at one point, he was in retirement, and he was asked by the French government to go to Algiers because there was a little bit of a revolution going on over there, and the French were running the place, and the marabouts, those priests of that time, would part of their thing be like a demonstration of magic, of something that would cause the people to think they have these great, incredible abilities. So Houdin comes out with this little box, maybe a foot long, 8 inches wide, and he would just place it down on the stage and ask the most powerful of the marabouts to come and pick up the box, and he could not do it. And then Houdin gestures to his 7-year-old son, who just walks over there and picks it up and walks away. So who has the greater magic, the marabout priest or the French?
Yeah.
So I think I put my money on France.
Well, yeah, genetically I have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But that's just one example of how new technology was presented as magic.
Is magic.
And there are so many great illusionary these designs that people are doing now, and thoughts, and just being able to to work with with 3D printing, for example, which I know virtually nothing about. I've watched several demonstrations of making these props and things, and it's just amazing stuff to me. So all technology, the same way people say, to be a mentalist, what books do you suggest reading? I said, any book in the world makes you understand people, that lets you understand perspective, that lets you understand a process, a philosophy, so much of it.
Let's talk about the little voice, because a lot of people refer to the little voice. They've gotten out of scrapes. I mean, they stepped aside just when the safe fell from the 50th floor right next to them. You know what I'm getting at. There was that little voice, or had I opened the door a second sooner, and it goes on and on. And there's a great Chinese saying that success has nothing to do with luck; it's about timing. And in magic, that's obviously there. But there's that little voice. I mean, I speak to a lot of painters, and a lot of painters, will relate the same feelings that I've had. It's and a lot of people have said, it's okay to have one voice, but when you have a multitude, now you got to start to worry. But you're painting, and it's like, not that green, this green. I think you should stop now. So it's intuition, it's a bunch of these other things, but I really do believe that we are predisposed to that sixth sense, to that intuitiveness, but
Yes.
Convention, and I'll throw religion under the bus. Religion has nothing to do with faith or spirituality. Organized religion pretty much threw that under the bus, because at one time they were like buddies during the medieval period. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, anything that's, science is bad, and science is nature. So it's all got to be on a belief system that you're like, well, how many burning bushes have you seen?
Yeah, it has to let you know how comfortable you are with yourself. And as we know, we can move anything back in 2 moves or less to fear, any problem that we have anywhere in this world. And belief, when I'm teaching things of a little more of the quote unquote spiritual nature, I say the things that are most important. And I do put little bumps of this into all of my presentations, even the comedy-based ones. So if I'm working in a nightclub, which I will be again. Actually, through the pandemic, I've been doing once or twice a month at the casino at the comics club, just to make sure I haven't lost anything off my fastball, and to see what works and see what works with pandemic audience, and very interesting stuff. But yeah, it's self-awareness is the key to everything. I have people do me a list of self words, self-reliance. Imagine if we taught the kids that. Imagine if we taught the Emerson Thoreau in school again. Self-reliance, self-respect. You can add so many of the, I ask people to comprise the list of the self words for me if we're doing like a class or something like that, and come back, because those are all the key things. So to have faith in, knowing who you are, we'll put off that, sometimes that voice we put off because of the fear. And sometimes we embrace it because of the fear.
Yeah.
So it's also knowing that every decision we make is either a happiness-based decision or a fear-based decision.
Yeah, risk or reward.
And it's okay.
Pain or pleasure, yeah.
It's okay to make fear-based decisions as long as you know that it's a fear-based decision.
So, we had the conversation because we're doing catching up prior to rolling the show officially. It's still very, very difficult for me to explain how, I've always been mesmerized by the feather in Forrest Gump from the first time. I mean, I've seen that movie, I don't know how many times. It's a lot of people like, oh, that's a funny movie. How you watch that, blah, blah. and it took the author 20 years to write that book. When, of course, with the fame from Hollywood, they forced them to do another one, and it was horrible. It was a mess. It generally is. But that idea of that feather as a concept is really quite interesting. That it's not just a symbol, it's not just an analogy. There's something, it's fate, and destiny.
I believe, yeah, I think it's really well done. And funny you mentioned Forrest Gump, because in a world where we're probably not going to have movies anymore, movies are going to be one thing, with actors. I don't know what they're going to call them, and then we're going to have all this other stuff that's not in my wheelhouse necessarily. But I do have to I have to take the Rumi philosophy if I want to continue working in this world and living in this world, and that's having a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing.
Right.
So I get pleasantly surprised, which is now I really dig it when I can learn something from some of the younger guys. When I met Sammy Davis the first time, he was, I was tongue tied. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy, so after I stammered, he just looks and goes, man, it's really groovy when the young cats dig you. So I say that to this day to the younger people in my field now who come to me and everything, and I hashtag that on all these things. It's really groovy when the cats dig you. To know these, these characters who inspire us to want to go on. That when you see like a story of like Sammy Davis, and you go, wow, you talk about fear, you talk about things that he has done.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look more, for just for equality and for race, what an incredible guy! What an absolutely incredible guy on love. A flawed human being, yes, and so are each and every one of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was funny when you spoke of luck before. I bring the concept of luck into the shows. I say, do you believe in luck? I said, well, I do. Because life's more fun with the belief of luck. Why not? I think that we're comforted. We all find comfort in ritual.
Yes, we do.
And so with a lot of the presentations that I do, little things, there is a very ritualistic type of thread that goes through a lot of these things that piques people's interest and keeps it going on. But another one of my heroes was Branch Rickey, who integrated baseball, and he was a ball player himself and a lawyer, and he said so many wonderful things. But one of his one line he's attributed to that I just love so much is that luck is the residue of design. And we have our passion, we have our thoughts, we have our dreams.
Mm-hmm.
This clears the path for us to be lucky, quote unquote.
Mm.
It's like Einstein when he said 2 ways to look at life: one that everything is a miracle, one that nothing is a miracle.
Yeah, that's true.
I live in the miracle camp because it's more fun.
Yeah.
There's more hope there.
Yeah.
And I don't look at it as being just a concept of being Pollyanna, but simple mind shifts can save people's lives, can certainly make your day, can certainly change things in a rather simple fashion.
Yeah.
We have a mental toolkit that allows us to, I rummage through it and say, oh, this will be a good one for me today. There's a Hawaiian practice that I'm very much interested in called Ho'oponopono that's gone on forever. And it has really been one of the things that has gotten me through.
Ho'oponopono.
Ho'oponopono. It's one of the things that it got me through pandemic times. Also, around the opera time, I was. That's when I learned when they used to have a Transcendental Meditation Center in New Bedford.
Yes.
And I learned there, and I continue to practice.
And I want to stop you on that one because there there were two guys that I know. They were trying to be flyers. And for people who don't know what a flyer is, these are the people that go to these TM centers, meditation centers. That one happened to be on Hawthorne Street. It was just around the block from my former house. And they would sit cross-legged, almost, lotus position, and they would lift up off the ground. And it looked like people trying to hop like rabbits without getting on their legs. They just, that kind of thing. But one of them was a photographer. His last name was Lemlin. I went to school with his sister at St. Anne's. I can't remember his first name, if it was Bob Lemlin, or, and the other one was Marty Rosenberg. I worked with Marty at the Office of Historic Preservation, and he unfortunately had the sad fate. His aunt and uncle were Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. So the family had to carry the weight of that,
Now, you said it was his uncle?
His aunt and uncle, yeah.
His aunt and uncle, because Gail took a class when she was at Western New England College, and I believe their son was the instructor.
Yeah.
And she didn't know anything about this until like the semester was over. Kind of thing.
The other one was Lemlin, the photographer. I worked with him when I transferred out of the Office of Historic Preservation to the Fort Tabor project, museum project. That's when, and for some reason I'm blanking on his last name. I went to school with, like I said, with his sister, and it was St. Anne's school. I mean, it was French Canadian, like all the way in the South End.
Sure.
Saulnier, the city councilman, it was the community pharmacy was like City Hall South. I mean, the French Canadians ran the South End, good, bad, or otherwise. We're going to start winding this down the next 4 or 5 minutes. I definitely want to have you come back on the show if you're open to it.
Oh, of course, anytime.
There's just so much more to tap into, not just your career, but also not your career as a topic, as a timeline kind of a thing, as a historic kind of a thing, but your career as, painters talk about painting. So why shouldn't mentalists speak about, illusion and magic and intuition and all those other things? And I'm going to ask. Go ahead.
When you're talking about painting, there are just a couple of things that quickly came to mind. And one is the difference between, say, a performance art and painting, where on one hand, I look, though a lot of very clever things come out of a live performance because I'm scripted, but I'm not heavily scripted, and I've never, I'm open to situation and I'm aware of what's taking place. Right. That is still exhibition. The art is when I am alone in this room with the lights not being so bright, and writing on the concept or what I think is going to happen or how I think it's, what it's going to be. That is the process of the art. The rest of it is exhibition. So I might as well be having, some canapé looking at this,
No, yeah, you're absolutely correct, because the way we were taught was, there's the exercise, the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And then there's the execution. And let's not forget concept. Concept could be great, but if you can't get execution, the concept is just that.
It'll hang there in space.
Right.
And I also love, now you have to help me with this.
Hmm?
I think it was a Picasso quote that I love, where it said, art critics talk about art. Artists talk about where to get good brushes.
I think that may have been him. But then again, there's another one of those flawed characters. If it wasn't for the 4 or 5 women in his life, we probably know nothing about him, because every relationship was a period.
Yeah.
But yet he had that peasant soul. Everybody wants to draw like a child, because it's so right. A child is they look down, they see grass, they look up, they see sky. That's what they see. The bottom of the paper is a strip of green, the top of the paper is a strip of blue. It's not naivete, it's illusion. Obviously
it's beauty is what it is.
I've only been involved in one illusion as an assistant to Lynn when she made the elephant and the donkey appear.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there's The Secret. Of course, because it's a trade secret, it's a craft secret. I mean, it's just like mediums with painters, you know, like for oils and such. Everybody has a secret medium that they use because this is more glossy, it's a little less
Sure.
glossy, more translucent, blah blah blah. But the the thing that, you know, everybody's so intent, and you know exactly where they're going to be looking. They're going to be looking at the most logical place to look. And that's why when they have those things on Facebook that drive me insane, oh, there's like a whole field of nines, and then there's 1 8 in the field, and like, look, if you find the odd number, you have a very high IQ. And it's like, lady, it's really not that difficult. They're going to put it out of your field of vision. It's always going to be on a parameter, you know, or it's going to be directly in front of you, so you'll see it so many times you never see it. You know, it's that kind of crazy thing. I mean, all right. So the pandemic.
Well,
how do you think the pandemic, for your audiences, not you, your audience, do they want more? Do they want Jon Stetson to give them that thing, that buzz, that thing that's going to make their step a little lighter when they leave your performance?
most definitely. Most definitely. I'm trying to think of a children's story that my buddy Mac King used to read to his daughter. It was about, Village of Mice. And all the other mice, quote unquote, worked. And there was this one mouse who was the storytelling mouse. And it was basically the value of the storyteller, the value of the source of what have you, and what an important component this is. I think people had to be very careful what kind of music they were listening to during the pandemic, because it could take you one way or the other. There were so many things going on. Yes, in times of the Depression, people wanted escape. They wanted to be out of their head for a moment. You know, they wanted to see Jean Harlow, an old movie buff, and these things. Whoa, and yeah, I totally left everything for the hour and a half for that movie.
Right.
For things, oftentimes, what I'll point out to people in a lot of my more, I call them more spiritually based programs, but as opposed to my strictly entertainment programs, but they've all kind of morphed into each other anyway. But there was a great line from a show in the 1700s. The most popular magician, he actually had a town named after him in New Hampshire, Richard Potter, Potter's Place. And it was also interesting that he was biracial, which was kind of interesting for those times, for him to be such a success and treated so very well everywhere he went,
and to be in the limelight.
Yes. And one of the things on his poster that I loved was an evening's brush to sweep away care. And I oftentimes will point out something that I call a blinding glimpse of the obvious to people. We all know it. But then when I'll mention it, of course, it's right there.
Right there.
I could have had a V8. It's that kind of stuff.
Those they call them gobsmacks and all the other things now. But
so there's that. But there also is a whole different way of presenting and a whole different headset to have. And I'm seeing many, many people who are doing many, many virtual presentations. If someone would have bet me a year ago, okay, this is what you're going to be doing, no way would I say I'd be staring at my computer, and I'd be more interested in switch decks and lights and microphones, and adopting my material, adopting other material to make it work, and the style of presenting. One of the huge mistakes that people make, and this is for these could be any. These could be little takeaways for anybody who's now presenting art in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Is one of the big things is don't mention the pandemic. That's not, or the expression, well, what we normally do. No, this is what we normally do.
Yeah.
And even the other day, someone said, well, in a live show, this isn't a live show.
Yeah.
What,
which one of us is dead?
Or, you would say something in a real show, real show, but you're taking money from these people.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right.
And when you're looking in these different platforms is to how to relate to people. The nature of my work is cool. Let's just say I learned a lot based on my own small fears of this. I pulled a few things back, and I interact with everybody on the screen. And I even say before we went on, before I'm introduced, I said, I've been watching you and I've been studying you. And that's what I do. I look at people and And so now it's funny. You see people adjusting themselves, and, trying to be subtle. And then you just point it out. You see, because that is real. Those are real moments. Those are genuine moments. And it takes out, and in pointing out the absurdity of all of us, it's fine. So initially I was thinking, it's kind of like a talk show. It's kind of like dealing with a talk show, though when I looked at all of the talk shows, it's like, will you guys shut up about the flipping pandemic?
Yeah. It's forced us. I mean, I really think that if we don't come out of this better as human beings, then we haven't learned a damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was teaching, I would tell my students, I said, there's a guy named Jay Peterman, and it's like, no, he wasn't just a character on the Seinfeld show. Then you're getting old, because when you start saying this sorry, and they like, who's Seinfeld? But anyway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I said there was this guy named Jay Peterman, and he had this manifesto. He asked all these experts what he should do to start his catalog company, his direct mail company, and he did everything the opposite of what they told him to. And on the inside cover, he had a manifesto, and the words that stick to me to this day, it basically starts off, when will American manufacturers learn, or American businesses learn? But people want things that make their lives the way they wish they were.
Which explains Facebook.
One final question to wrap this up. Not that this is going to be your last time here, but how would you like people to remember you? I remember you from one thing, a bumper sticker.
Oh, the disco bumper sticker,
the disco bumper sticker, yeah. If Jon Stetson's so good, why can't he make disco disappear?
Yes, many people like that. There are so many fun things through where people will have their own particular memory, or they're touched. So that being, some people who might have come to that ladies only event we have, they tell me in ways that their life has been changed, and I've influenced them, or I've saved their life. Rather drastic, but true. Wow. And then there are other places where they say, I will never forget that creating almost like a legend kind of things. And when people come over to me and say, my grandmother told me that you did this thing, that kind of stuff. I'm always conscious of the fact that we really die twice. Once when our physical body gives out, and the other time is when our name is never mentioned again.
Yeah.
The last time our name is mentioned or evoked or something.
The Egyptians' greatest fear.
Yeah.
And
Kardashians.
Yeah, and the African proverb that when the last person dies that knows your name, you die again.
That's it.
that kind of thing.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'd like to be remembered as I know I'll be remembered as sort of a complicated guy. I've had things in my life where I've gone through a lot of phases and things and difficulty as a flawed human being. I'd like to be remembered maybe as somebody who learned from their mistakes, maybe not the first time they made them,
Yeah.
but someone who learned from their mistakes, and someone who was extremely passionate and cared very much about the things that I care about. And those in the old days would get me a little agitated, and I'd get it, they'd say, "Oh, ask Stetson about this. We'll have a great show for 10 minutes. He'll rant and rave."
Yeah, he'll go off the edge. Yeah.
Do that. Yeah. So I was that guy.
Yeah.
I'd like to be remembered as being a nice man.
Yeah. Well, those are the only memories I have of you. But with that in mind, I'd like to thank you, Jon Stetson, for being our guest. And this is Ron Fortier with the wrapping up another episode of the In Focus podcast. And, no matter what you do, be kind to each other. That's the most important thing.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.